We're going to conclude reading out loud about Nigel Neal. This article is sourced from the Free Encyclopedia. In 1982, Neal made another one-off diversion from his usual work when he wrote his only produced Hollywood movie script, Halloween-free Season of the Witch. Neal was approached by the director John Landis to work on the screenplay for a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon, and Neal and his wife spent some time living at the Sheraton Hotel in Hollywood while Neal worked on the project. The Black Lagoon script never went into production, but while in America, Neal met the director Joe Dante, who invited him to script the third film in the Halloween series on which Dante was working. Neal agreed on the proviso that it would be a totally new concept unrelated to the first two films, which he had not seen and he did not like what he had heard about them. Neal's treatment for the film met with the approval of John Carpenter, the producer of the Halloween series, although Neal was required to write the script in 6 weeks. Neal had a positive relationship with the director assigned to the film, Tommy Lee Wallace, but when one of the film's backers, Dino De Laurentiis, insisted upon the inclusion of more graphic violence in a rewrite of the script from Wallace, Neal became displeased with the results and had his name removed from the film. He returned to writing scripts for British television, including Gentry with Roger Daltrey for ITV in 1987 and the 1989 adaptation of Susan Hill's novel The Woman in Black for transmission on ITV on Christmas Eve. Lynn Truss, reviewing a repeat broadcast of the production on Channel 4 for the Times in 1994, wrote that clip-clop is not usually a noise to get upset about, but it will be an interesting test today to go up behind people and whisper clip-clop to find out whether they saw The Woman in Black last night. People who made the bold decision to watch this excellent drama will respond to any clip-clop by gratifyingly leaping in the air and grabbing the backs of their necks. The adaptation nearly went unmade. Neal had written the script in 10 days, but been advised by his agent to wait before submitting it to the producer's Central Independent Television so they would not think he had rushed it. When he did submit the script 3 weeks later, he discovered that Central had been about to cancel the production, as they had assumed that Neal, then 67, had not been able to complete the work due to his age. Susan Hill did not like some of the changes that Neal had made to The Woman in Black. It has been observed that Neal on some occasions operated a double standard with adaptations, being unhappy when others made changes to his stories, but willing to make changes to stories he was adapting into script form. Referring to the Woman in Black adaptation, the writer and critic Kim Newman noted that he was very offended at the notion of Susan Hill using the name of Kipps from H.G. Wells as the hero of The Woman in Black, so he decided not to use it and to change the hero's name to Kid. I'm sure if somebody thought that Quatermass was a silly name and changed it, he'd be furious. However, Neal's adaptations are not always unpopular with the original author. In 1991, a 4-part version he wrote of Kingsley Amos's novel Stanley and the Women met with approval from the original author, with Amos regarding it as the most successful adaptation of his work. Neal also adapted Sharp's Gold for ITV in 1995 as part of their series of adaptations of Bernard Cornwell's Sharp novels. This was an assignment that surprised his agent. We didn't think he'd want to bother with them, but he did. That was probably because he liked the producer. He returned to writing for radio for the first time since the 1950s in 1996 when he wrote the drama documentary The Quatermass Memoirs for BBC Radio 3. Partly composed of Neal looking back at the events that led to the writing of the original 3 Quatermass serials and using some archive material, there was also a dramatised strand to the series set just before the ITV Quatermass serial and featuring Andrew Kerr, star of the Hammer version of Quatermass in the Pit, as the Professor. While recording an audio commentary for that film in 1997, Neal speculated about a possible Quatermass prequel set in 1930s Germany. According to The Independent, Neal conceived a storyline involving the young Quatermass becoming involved in German rocketry experiments in the 1930s and helping a young Jewish woman to escape from the country during the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Neal was invited to write for the successful American science fiction series The X-Files, 1993 to 2002, but declined the offer. His final professional work was an episode of the ITV legal drama Kavanaugh QC starring John Ford. Neal's episode, Ancient History, was about a Jewish woman who during the Second World War had been subjected to horrific experiments in a concentration camp. He continued to appear as an interview subject in various television documentaries and also recorded further audio commentaries for the release of some of his productions on DVD. In 2005, he acted as a consultant when the digital television channel BBC4 produced a live remake of the Quatermass experiment. He lived in Barnes, London, until his death on 29th of October 2006 at the age of 84, following a series of small strokes. When he joined BBC, Neal was impressed with the state in which they found BBC television drama. However, he was frustrated at what he saw as the slow and boring styles of television drama production then employed, which he felt wasted the potential of the medium. Together with Cartier, he would helped revolutionise British television drama and establish it as an entity separate from its theatre and radio equivalents. Television historian Les Cook wrote in 2003 that between them, Neil and Cartier were responsible for introducing a completely new dimension to television drama in the early to mid 1950s. Jason Jacobs, a lecturer in film and television studies at the University of Warwick, wrote, "It was the arrival of Nigel Neal and Rudolph Cartier that changed the intimate drama directly. Neal and Cartier shared a common desire to invigorate television with a faster tempo and a broader thematic and spatial canvas, and it was no coincidence that they turned to science fiction in order to get out of the dominant stylistic trend of television intimacy." The writer and actor Mark Gatiss indicated that Neal was among the first rank of British television writers, but that this had been overlooked. He is amongst the greats. He is absolutely as important as Dennis Potter, as David Mercer, as Alan Bleasdale, and as Alan Bennett. But I think because of a strange snobbery about fantasy or sci-fi, it's never quite been in that way. The Guardian commented that Neal was by no means the only author to have been largely wasted by television and to have seen his status overtaken by soap opera hacks, but his place is secure alongside Wells, Arthur C. Clarke, John Wyndham, and Brian Aldiss as one of the best, most exciting, and most compassionate English science fiction writers of his century. Writing about the year of the Sex Olympics, Nancy Banks Smith felt that Neal was one of the few television writers whose work was particularly memorable. "At the name of Neal, I feel every knee should bow. How much TV do you remember from last night, last year, last century? Quite. Curiously, I can remember clearly the first time I saw The Year of the Sex Olympics by Nigel Neal. It was 35 years ago." Neal was admired by the film director John Carpenter. The horror fiction writer Stephen King has cited Neal as an influence, and Kim Newman suggested in 2003 that King had more or less rewritten Quatermass and the Pit in the Tommyknockers. Other writers have acclaimed Neal as an influence on their work, including comics writer Grant Morrison and television screenwriter Russell T Davies, who described the Beast episode Baby as the most frightening thing I've ever seen. Powerful stuff. Film screenwriter and director Dan O'Bannon was also an admirer of Neal's writing, and in 1993 wrote a potential remake of the Quatermass experiment, of which Neal approved, but the film was never made. Other entertainment industry figures that publicly expressed admiration for Neal's work include the Beatles drummer Ringo Starr, members of the rock group Pink Floyd, and Monty Python's Flying Circus writer/performer Michael Palin. Neal never saw himself as a science fiction writer and was often critical of the genre. He particularly disliked the BBC series Doctor Who, 1963 to 89, 1996, 2005 to present, for which he had once turned down an offer to write. He also criticised Doomwatch and Blake 7, with the latter described as the lowest point of British television science fiction. Doctor Who was heavily influenced by Neal's Quatermass serials, and in some cases even using specific storylines that were similar to those from Quatermass, such as The Ambassadors of Death. This one of my favourite Doctor Who serials, possibly for this reason, however. Thanks everyone, we'll conclude it here. Next time, we'll just be discussing Inferno, in 7 parts. Who knows how we'll make up the time there.